For a long time, men's golf had a clear reference point. No matter who was winning in a given week, no matter how hot another player's form looked, the benchmark was still Rory McIlroy. His longevity, his consistency, and his ability to contend year after year made him the standard everyone else was measured against. If you wanted to prove you were truly the best in the world, you didn't just win tournaments, you had to surpass Rory. And for a long time, that felt like a line no one could truly cross. That's why what happened next caught so many people off guard. Scottie Scheffler didn't just have a strong season, he didn't just pick up a few big wins, he beat Rory McIlroy head-to-head when it mattered. He outperformed him across an entire year in ways that were hard to argue with. Awards, results, and key moments all tilted in the same direction. This wasn't a single hot stretch or a favorable matchup. It was sustained, undeniable, and very public. And suddenly, the conversation changed. Not long ago, that outcome would have seemed almost impossible. Scheffler was elite, yes, but Rory was Rory, the player with the higher ceiling, the broader resume, the aura that came from more than a decade at the top. Scheffler was supposed to chase, not replace. He was supposed to be part of the pack, not the one setting the pace. That's why this shift felt so jarring. It challenged assumptions that had quietly solidified over years. And now the most uncomfortable question in golf is hanging in the air. If Scottie Scheffler can beat Rory McIlroy directly and outpace him over a full season, what does that say about the balance of power in men's golf right now? Because moments like this don't just decide trophies, they redefine eras. To understand why this moment carries so much weight, you have to understand Rory McIlroy's place in the game. For more than a decade, he has been golf's measuring stick, not just because of wins, but because of consistency. Season after season, across different courses, conditions, and eras, Rory has remained relevant at the very top. He became the reference point, the player others were compared to, not replaced. And that kind of stature doesn't disappear quietly. That's where expectations were set, and they were clear. Scottie Scheffler was elite, undoubtedly, a world-class talent with a game built for modern golf. But elite didn't automatically mean above Rory. The assumption was that Scheffler would exist alongside him, not overtake him. Rory's combination of experience, global presence, and proven longevity made him feel insulated from being clearly surpassed. At least that's how it looked for a long time. The reason this comparison has always been so difficult is because separating great players at the top of golf rarely comes down to one moment. Their careers overlap, their peaks intersect. One wins here, the other responds there. The margins are thin and debates stay unresolved. That's why head-to-head clarity is so rare in this sport. Usually the hierarchy stays blurred just enough to preserve the status quo, which is why beating Rory means something very specific. It's not about a single trophy or a single Sunday. It's about redefining who sets the standard. When someone consistently outperforms the benchmark, the hierarchy shifts whether people are ready for it or not. And once that shift begins, it changes how every result is interpreted from that point forward. What makes Scottie Scheffler's rise so convincing is that it's backed by moments that are hard to dismiss. This wasn't decided in theory or reputation, it happened on the course. Head-to-head meetings mattered, and Scheffler came out on top when he shared the stage with Rory McIlroy. Whether it was in playoff situations or key events where both were in contention, Scheffler didn't blink. Those moments carry extra weight because they remove excuses. When players face the same pressure, the result speaks clearly. Beyond individual matchups, the season-long picture told an even stronger story. Player of the Year recognition didn't come from one hot stretch or a handful of highlights. It reflected sustained excellence over months of competition. Scheffler accumulated results steadily, while others fluctuated. That kind of recognition is the outcome of accumulation, not emotion. And when those honors come at the expense of someone like McIlroy, they underline a shift rather than a coincidence. Statistically, the gap was built through control rather than spectacle. Scheffler didn't overwhelm fields with constant fireworks. He separated himself through consistency. High finishes, clean rounds, and very few off weeks. While others surged and faded, he stayed present. Under pressure, his game looked smaller, simpler, and more reliable. That's not flashy golf, but it's winning golf. And over time, it compounds. That's why this run can't be explained away as luck or short-term form. Repeatable performance is the hardest thing to sustain at the top of the sport, and Scheffler showed it across an entire season. The patterns didn't change when the stakes rose. If anything, they sharpened. And when performance becomes predictable in big moments, it stops being a surprise and starts becoming the new normal. What makes this moment so fascinating is that Rory McIlroy hasn't disappeared. He's still elite, still capable of winning anywhere in the world, still one of the most complete players the game has ever seen. But the difference now is subtle and important. He's no longer unquestioned. For the first time in years, Rory isn't automatically the reference point. He's part of a comparison, and that alone marks a shift that would have felt unthinkable not long ago. Around the golf world, the reaction was immediate. Analysts started pointing out the gap that had quietly formed over the season. Not a collapse from Rory, but a level of consistency from Scheffler that was hard to ignore. Fans noticed it too. The conversations changed tone. Instead of asking when Rory would reclaim his place, people began debating whether he'd already been overtaken. That's not a debate golf has had often, and certainly not lightly. Media coverage reflected that tension. Headlines stopped framing Scheffler as a challenger and started treating him as a benchmark in his own right. Rory's results were no longer judged in isolation, but in direct comparison. Finishing second suddenly felt different when the player ahead of you was the same one week after week. And in a sport built on narratives as much as numbers, perception matters more than people like to admit, which brings the rivalry to a crossroads. Is this just a temporary swing, the kind that happens when form aligns and confidence peaks? Or is this the beginning of something more permanent, a passing of responsibility from one era's standard bearer to the next? The answer isn't clear yet, but the fact that the question is being asked at all tells you how much has already changed. As the dust settles, the future of men's golf suddenly looks far less settled than it did before. One possible path is clear. Scottie Scheffler becomes the new standard. Not just the world number one on paper, but the player everyone measures themselves against. The one whose consistency sets expectations and whose presence changes how tournaments are approached. That kind of status isn't claimed, it's accepted over time. And Scheffler is now close enough that the shift no longer feels theoretical. But the story doesn't end there, because Rory McIlroy has never been someone who fades quietly. Another path leads to response. Adjustment, a recalibration driven by pride and experience. Rory has answered challenges before, and history suggests he's capable of doing it again. If he responds, this doesn't become a replacement, it becomes a rivalry with real stakes. The kind where each result feels like a statement, not just a scorecard. And golf has always been at its best when standards are contested. That's where the rivalry enters its most important phase. This is no longer about isolated moments or selective comparisons. It's about sustained performance under constant scrutiny. Scheffler didn't do the impossible by beating Rory once. He did it by doing so consistently, publicly, and decisively enough to force a conversation no one was ready for. That's how hierarchies change, not with noise, but with repetition. So, as the next seasons unfold, one question sits at the center of it all. Has Scottie Scheffler permanently changed the pecking order in golf? Or is this the beginning of a battle that will define the era ahead?